What's up guys, Alberto Big Boost here. Today we're going to be working on the rotating assembly of the 2JC. So we're going to be installing the crankshaft that I have over here. We have pistons and rods and raised bearings. Yesterday I picked up my 2JC block from the machine shop. So this block is bored 20 over to 86.5. It has been decked, so it got a nice clean surface for a metal head gasket. Then they hot tanked the block, cleaned everything, and they even sprayed it for me. I was gonna paint it black, but it's already painted for me, so cool. That saves a lot of time. So now it's time to assemble my engine. I have the stock crankshaft right here, which I already cleaned up. It's all ready to go. I have BC connecting rods, CP pistons, and then I have ACL raised bearings. So we first turn the engine upside down, then we take the main caps off. Another thing you want to do at this point is to air out any particles that might be on the blocks. You want to air out through all the oiling orifices to get any trash out of the system. And then you have a fresh block to build upon. Once you open up the bearings, you have two bags. You have one side that has a groove and holes throughout the bearing. This one goes to the block. And then you have this yellow bag one that's a flat bearing. That one goes to the main cap. Once you open the bearings, you'll notice that they all have this little dent here, or a little part that sticks out. Then you have this one bearing that has the little notch over to the other side. So this one goes into the #1 journal. Also be sure to remove any oil out of the surface of the journal, so you don't have any oil between the bearing and the journal here. So you install them dry. So you kind of like just line this part up here, and then you press it down, make sure it's flat, and that's how you install the bearing. Now it's time to make things slick. So we're gonna be using some Permatex Ultra Slick engine assembly lube on my bearings. So we pretty much just like squirt a line like this. And then after that we can spread it around the bearing. Now just with your finger you can just like spread it around the bearing, so it's all coated red like this.
I don't want to get up from the chair, I'm recording right here.
Lazy. Now we're moving on to the truss bearings. You'll notice there's two kinds. There's this ones with this flat part here, and then this one. You'll also notice that there's like a pointy side and a V-shaped side. So they're pretty much gonna go like this. So make sure to line up each side like that. This one goes in the bottom and this one goes in the top. So we're gonna take a little bit of assembly lube, put it on the face that contacts the crankshaft. That's the one that has the groove. So the groove is facing the crankshaft. And so we're gonna like slide this into this slot like this, and then turn it so it slides all the way into the groove. Then we're gonna do the same thing with the other side. Oh, too much lube. And then it slides in there like that. Installing the truss bearings correctly is very crucial, since this is how we're gonna keep your crankshaft from moving back and forward. They hold the thrust of the crankshaft in spec. So yeah, make sure to install a groove facing the outside. That way it's able to have a lubricant film between the crankshaft and the bearing. The same deal goes to the rest of the caps. So we clean all the oil from them. Then we install the bearing dry. Of course, the #1 journal, it's bigger. You can tell kind of like the difference once you put a bearing, that they are a little bit thinner than the other one. Then we loop all the main caps, we spread it, and then put them on. Of course, make sure that the #4 cap is the one that's gonna be using the truss washers, so don't forget those. Alright, this is how the truss washers goes in. So it has this little groove here that lines up to the cap. So when you're gonna install it, you make sure to hold them from here so the bearing doesn't fall off on installation. Also very important, apply a pint of lubrication to that as well. If you are using ARP bolts, make sure to use some fastener assembly lubricant on the threads before putting the washers or nuts into these. So basically it's like put a little bit on the threads like this, then you can slide on the washer, that way there's lubricant between the washer and the main cap, and then put lubricant again so there's lubricant between the nut and the washer. See, we have some lubricant on, and we put the washer. Now there's lubricant between the washer and this so it can torque properly. Then you go ahead and apply a little bit more. That way there's lubricant on the threads and it will slide down onto the washer as well. Next I'm gonna be torquing the main caps in sequence. So these studs are gonna be torqued to 75 foot-pounds, but I'm going to do 30, then 60, then 75. It's supposed to be kind of 3, but since 75 is not that much, I'm just gonna do 36 and 75 and it should be good. And then after that, we're gonna assemble the pistons and rods. Now we're gonna torque the last pass to 75 pounds. I always record this stuff since you guys always catch if I miss something or whatever. That way I have it recorded. And if I miss something, I can always trace back and fix it. Very handy. It has happened to me before. It happens to all of us. Let's go ahead and torque this thing real neat. I also love having this torque wrench that beeps and has a digital display, so it makes torquing a lot easier. Mark, I remember one time on the BMW, I forgot to do the green on one of the main studs, and somebody caught it on the videos, and then I was able to catch it in time and fix it.
Yep.
So it kept me from blowing up my motor. Alright, we got one more. Well, one cap. And we're done. I think I got all of them. Up next is piston rings. We're gonna go ahead and open the CP piston box. You're gonna find your information about the pistons here. Then of course you have the wristband clips. Piston rings are all on top, and then underneath this you have the fresh pistons and wristbands. For piston ring sizing, you're gonna get your bore size, which in this case is 3.406 inches, and then you have this chart over here. You can select from street and high performance, which is like street applications. This is probably recommended for engines probably shooting about 500 horsepower or less. It's fine to use that. Anything more than that you want to choose about like drag racing and road racing, which is a little bit bigger. That's the one I'm going with. Then you have nitrous and turbocharged, which is like for like serious drag racing only. This is the best, but for street use it's not recommended, since you will have a little bit of excessive blow by. So we're gonna go with the medium right here. So we're gonna multiply our bore size by 0.005. So we put here 3.406 times 0.005, and then we have a gap of 17. Then the second ring is gonna be 0.004 or 0.008 bigger. That means we'll have 17, and then we will do 21 through 25 on the second ring. That's where we grab our feeler gauge, and we're gonna look for 0.017. This is the one that we're gonna be using to gap our rings to. We're gonna take the top compression ring, slide it here, and we're gonna use the piston and very gently push it down until you kind of like get this skirt part flush with the block. You don't want to go to the top, you want to go like towards the center of the bore so you get an accurate measurement. And it's gonna look like this. Then we're gonna measure the gap that we have here, which looks almost entirely closed, so I'm gonna have to grind quite a bit. We're gonna be using this piston ring grinder. Just put the piston ring here, and we gently take off some material to increase the gap. Now that we have the proper ring gap, the number 17 fits snugly in there. I just finished the gap of the top piston rings on all 6 cylinders. Now we're gonna move on to the secondary rings. If this is not convenient, I don't know what is. So all 6 cylinders already from factory, gap exactly 21. So that saves me a lot of time having to grind another set of rings. So that's perfect. Since we're done with piston rings, we can put that aside, and now we can move on to the actual piston installation on the rods. I just have to take some time to admire how shiny and nice this looks. Now we have the Briancrower rods. I'm gonna open this up. Some papers here. Then we're gonna be using the Briancrower H-beam rods with the ARP 2000 bolts. These are easy enough instructions, so these are the specs of my rods. And then these have 3/8 ARP 2000 bolts that are gonna be torqued to 45 foot-pounds of torque. So I went ahead and opened all the rods, and then these come with the bolts torqued to 45 foot-pounds. So you wanna go ahead and loosen this up. So it's very important to not just grab the rod with a metal surface. I'm using this aluminum vice cloth to hold the rod while I loosen the bolt. It's easier also loosening the bolt without the piston, because you don't risk like damaging the piston while trying to do this. So just leave the cap loose, then we assemble the piston onto the rod, and then we can put the bearings. Now comes the part where we need safety glasses, because we're gonna be dealing with wristband clips. This thing sometimes like to fly, and my eye is not one direction I want it to come. There's probably tons of ways to do this thing out there, but I just like doing it this way. So pretty much put one of the legs past a little dimple hole here, and then you kind of press down with a screwdriver, drive it in without scratching anything. And keeping a thumb on it so it doesn't fly out, and then it just clips in and we're good. All 6 pistons have one piston ring clip, so now we can go ahead and install the rods onto the pistons and then put the clip on the other side. On the top of the pistons, you can tell that I marked a forward facing dot. You'll notice that the intake valves are always bigger than the exhaust. So on the 2JC, the intake goes to this side, exhaust is on this side, so front is this way. Now I use a little bit of Permatex Ultra Slick assembly lube. Throw on my fingers, kind of like lube up the wristband. Then we take a piston, we go over the side that does not have a clip, we put in like kind of like halfway like this. Then we take a rod, and we take a piston, we put the wristband through the side that does not have a clip. Then we can grab a rod and then insert the wristband through. And we can put this aside, and then we're gonna put a clip on the other side. Now it's time to install the piston rings on the pistons. But first, I wanna go ahead and clean the piston rings off. So I put a little bit of ATF on a rag, then I clean it off, and then you can actually get a little bit of still of material of the pistons that is gonna ease the braking period. Just rub the ring onto this spot right here. You can tell there's a little bit of residue that came off the ring, and then you also do the secondary ring as well. and then install them on the piston. Another thing about this, it also lubricates the piston rings to enable braking procedure. Here's with the second piston ring. So again, by lubricating this, it makes the braking procedure a lot nicer on the pistons. We'll start by installing the oil control rings. First we have this nice accordion style ring. You slide over, put it on the last slot. Then we got these really thin rings that hold that ring in place. So this one, we start in a corner, then we work it around and lock it on the other side. Oh, it jumped. There we go. Now we do the other one, same thing. And oil control ring is in place. Then we can install the secondary compression ring. For this, we're gonna use this nice piston ring expander tool. Just put your piston ring here. Opens it up. You don't want to twist this ones. So we're just gonna expand it, slide over the groove, let go, and piston ring is in place. Then we do the same thing with the top compression ring. Then what you want to do, you want to take the gap from the secondary ring and put it opposite from the first one. So you're going to put the first one facing this way and then the secondary facing the opposite way. All the pistons are done. Now we just have to put bearings on them, but before we put the pistons in, we need to lubricate the cylinder walls. So for that, I'm going to use a little bit of ATF with a blue shop towel. And then with that, we're just gonna like put a little bit and rub it through, lubricate it, and also it's gonna take any fine dust that you couldn't clean off from the cylinder walls with that as well. You'll be surprised how much stuff comes out of there. So here's my rack now, clean. You're gonna go and just clean up the board real quick. And look at all the stuff that comes out. Now we're going to be using the piston ring compressor. So we take piston, we open this up. We already have the piston ring lines up the way we want it. So they're facing the right orientation. And then we're going to compress everything with this tool. Then at the same time, we're going to take the rod cap off and we're going to install the rod bearings. And the rod bearings, they're all the same, so you can't mix them up. And once you go into the little groove, then you apply some assembly lubricant on the bearing. You kind of spread it all around so it's all coated and it's ready to go in. When you're compressing the piston rings, make sure to leave the skirt exposed. That way you can use this to line up the piston in place, and then this part will sit on the top of the block. When installing the piston, make sure that the crank is at bottom dead center, and then you install the rod, pretty much feed it through like this, gently, not to scratch the cylinder walls. And like I said, the skirt goes in, this thing stays on the top. So you're gonna use the hammer, tap this, make sure it's flush against the block. Then at this point, also recheck that it's tight all the way, it doesn't click anymore. And now use the bottom of the hammer and you gently tap. It's all the way in. Remove this, then we can feed the piston all the way through until it hits the crankshaft. Now what I like doing, I like to apply a little bit more of assembly lubricant here, just like a drop. Now I can install the other side of the rod cap. Make sure you line up those little notches one with the other, so the rod cap is lined up. Put on like this. Then we're gonna be using this stuff. This is the assembly lubricant from BC. So we're gonna apply this to the bolt threads and under the head area during installation. We're gonna take this, open it up. Then we pretty much can grab the bolt. It's like dress it on this, and then take a little bit, put on this area, and then install it on the rod. Do the same thing with the other one. Then we're gonna torque the rods to 45 foot-pounds. I like to, since I have a digital gauge, I can run like 20 on the display on both sides, and then crank it up to 45. And we're done. JK, just 5 more rods to go. Oh my god, I'm supposed to pick up a pizza and I have till 10. I gotta get out of here. I love being able to do this. Oh. Alright. Aha, we're good to go. Oh, nothing beats pizza when building a motor. Except this. Oh. This has to be one of my new favorite pizzas. The stuffed crust pepperoni that they have at Little Caesar is delicious. Before I install the last rod, I want to show you guys a comparison between the BC rod and GE piston versus a stock OEM GE VVTi piston and rod. Theo? Okay, going back to the pistons. Another thing you can clearly see is that the wristband on the CP piston is a lot thicker than the OEM one, so this one holds a lot more power. Something that's really cool to look at too is that the piston rings on the stock GTE or GE are almost like twice as thick as the aftermarket piston rings, like the CP one. So this has a lot less friction on the cylinder wall as the stock rings. Then moving on to the top, you can tell that the CP piston has a lot bigger valve reliefs if you want to run like big cams, which you might have valve interference on the stock pistons. Then on the bottom, you can tell how much more reinforced the CP one is right here. So there's like a big thick structural piston compared to the stock one. It's a little bit weaker. Plus this is also a stronger alloy and it's a forged piston versus the cast stock one. The rods, I like using the H-beams because they are very hydrodynamic rods, so the oil pretty much just goes through this and it slides through. On this one it kind of just does whatever and just slaps around. The bottom of the rod is also a lot smaller, so it's less tough to slosh into oil, whereas this one has a lot more material down here. All the pistons are in, all the rods are torqued to 45 foot-pounds, and everything spins smooth as a baby. Well guys, the 2JC block rotating assembly is done. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you guys learn a couple things about building a rotating assembly on a performance engine, as well as any other stock engine. It's the same thing, except maybe the piston ring clearance changes and the parts used change, but the concept is still the same. Once I receive the oil pump, I will be able to continue to the next part of the assembly video. I've been taking a little bit longer than I thought on this build, since a lot of the parts are taking longer than usual to deliver, since the whole COVID-19 thing is delaying a lot of shipping, because is not as important as other essential things. So they're prioritizing essential items, and then obviously car parts are not as essential. So I have to wait a little bit for them to come in so then I can start making the videos for you guys. Again, thank you so much, Briancrower, for hooking me up with all these parts. It really made a big difference on the outcome of this build. So that means I'll be able to make a lot of power with this. I made the car ultra reliable, so that way I can just enjoy the car, have fun driving, and push the E36 to the limit. If you guys enjoy videos like this, subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell up there. And also don't forget to smash that like button. I'm gonna be covering every single detail about this build as well. And then all the other parts that I've been installing on the car, as well as other cars that I also have as new project cars, so stay tuned. Well, it's midnight, time to get out of here. I'll see you guys in the next video.